Hello and welcome to Business Today Television. I'm Siddharth Zarabi, live from Davos. The snow behind us, a bit of the sun, and with me two prominent lights of Indian industry, Mr. Nadir Godrej, Chairman of Godrej Industries, and Amitabh Chaudhry, MD and CEO of Axis Bank. Welcome. It's a bit cold. I wish we could tell our viewers how cold it was actually, and that's why we are all dressed in the best winter finery that we could muster. Mr. Godrej, 2023, after a year of unprecedented uncertainty, what's the top level view looking like from here, even as some people are preparing to ski on the mountain tops behind us?
Yes, there have been problems all over the world. Of course, the pandemic, the Ukraine-Russia war, the huge commodity boom. But the commodity boom at least is largely over, and that's of some relief to India. A lot of the inflation was commodity-based in India. The commodity-based inflation is pretty much gone, and that's why India's inflation numbers are better. And though exports are under a challenge with the global crisis, the Indian economy itself is doing reasonably well. Urban demand is good, rural demand is a bit slow, but expected to pick up pretty soon. And inflation is likely to come under control. I'm more optimistic on this than many other viewers, but I'm reasonably sure that inflation is under control and the RBI is not likely to raise interest rates by much.
Several headlines in that first answer by Mr. Godrej. Amitabh, coming to you, since Mr. Godrej has given us a cue about the RBI not raising interest rates. Do you agree with that view in the macro backdrop that we have?
So my view is that I think we're definitely coming towards the end of the interest rate hike cycle. Now, is it another 25 basis points or zero, as Mr. Godrej said? The time will tell. Our view, at least our internal house view, is that it's another 25 basis points.
Yeah.
But new trend which we have also seen recently off late is that some economists have started predicting interest rate cuts in the next 12 to 18 months. And I'm not saying I'm necessarily with them, but you are seeing a clear trend where the economists are...
Does your in-house economist agree with that view?
He does expect some interest rate cuts, but maybe not that quickly. And I'll tell you why. The thing which is worrying me, I mean, I completely agree with what Mr. Godrej said. There are three things which worry me. One, on the inflation itself, while around the world we are seeing inflation definitely trending down with all the action that has been taken by central bankers around the world, inflation could be sticky. As China is opening up, and the way they have opened up, people are expecting stocking up to come back and commodity inflation to pick up all over again, to some extent. Let's see how that plays out. I think the oil-producing countries have shown again and again that they can keep oil prices high, and they've managed to do it.
And the Indian government has shown that it can sort of counter that with the latest numbers, and these are numbers that are out from the India Today group, from our data intelligence unit. 20% of our oil imports are now coming from Russia. Amitabh, just one quick follow-up before I go to Mr. Godrej. Japan now considering changes to its ultra-loose, multi-decade monetary policy. Explain that to the lay viewer in the simplest manner that you can.
Well, Japan has gone through a kind of a recession or low growth period for the longest period of time. And to ensure and to kind of somehow spur the economy, they have kept interest rates low also historically for a very, very long period of time so that people spend and the economy could be revived. I think post what they have seen happening around the world, they gave a signal that maybe that time period is over. They do need to relook at how they will manage interest rates, and that was a change. And markets don't like change, unexpected change. That's why the markets reacted the way they reacted. I think the impact of that is not going to be huge, but it's the change and the unexpected change which spooked the markets.
Spoils the party really. Mr. Godrej, on that point that you made earlier, you spoke about rural demand, which should be of great concern to any policymaker in India. Of course, Main Street and North Block cooperate, and they also have two different purposes to serve. Has the recent interest rate hike cycle, 225 basis points plus, impacted consumption demand, and you yourself work in that sector?
It has to some extent, but a bigger problem for the rural economy is that earlier the crops were not very good, erratic monsoons, but the last monsoon was fairly good, and the rabi crops are shaping up generally well, and that is why I think rural demand will slowly pick up. But it would be very helpful if the government boosts the rural economy. I am not a great fan of subsidies because subsidies lead to a lot of inefficiency. I would urge the government to reduce subsidies and increase cash transfers, which have a much bigger impact on the economy and are much fairer and don't have unintended consequences of over-consuming goods unnecessarily.
Quick follow-up on that. Very recently, the government decided to exit out of the COVID-era free food scheme, but what they did was to, in some ways, tweak the earlier national food security a bit also. What it seems, Mr. Godrej, is that a certain amount of free food grains are now pretty much a fixture as far as economy is concerned. Do you agree with what the government has done?
Well, it's very good to support the poor people, but I still feel that cash transfers are a better way of doing it because they can spend that money as they see fit and not necessarily on food. And we are largely supporting cereals, and the big problem in India is the shortage of protein and micronutrients. So
cash in hand will allow
them to
even
buy
rural
more
households.
And
there is one more thing coming with
Yeah.
digital currency. Digital currency will potentially allow you to release the money for very specific purposes. If you tokenize that money, it will be
That's
against
a brilliant point. That's a brilliant point.
So it will allow
what
the
Mr. Chaudhry is saying, and I'll say it on his behalf, that instead of the fear that money going into a particular household where the man of the house goes and buys liquor, you could prevent that happening by the point of tokenization. Please continue your point.
Very
So,
good point.
so I think that, and that's why RBI and government is pushing it. Obviously, very early stages of development
Yes.
in this area, but I think with the kind of platforms the government has successfully created, I'm sure this will also play out. So this use case seems to make a lot of sense, and obviously, as Mr. Godrej said, also speaks to what he's saying. Rather than giving subsidies, give cash benefits. I think I would agree with you that while on one side government wants to spur investments, government is itself spending a lot of money for capital expenditure, has been raising that amount. On the other side, one of the important fixtures of what the government wants to do is to continue to speak to the marginalized sections of society and do whatever it needs to do to either bring them up, either through cash transfers, jobs, retraining, reskilling, whatever that might be. I think that is pretty much part of a government agenda, and frankly, I think that's what the government should be looking at doing anyway.
We'll turn our attention to the global backdrop from an India point of view. Mr. Godrej, you met a lot of people globally, and I'm sure in your stay here at Davos, you will get to meet many more. What's the view on India? We just heard one view which says that China plus one may work, but in the long term, but India is not looked at in the same category as China. Would you agree with that view?
Yes and no. India is definitely getting a lot of business that used to go to China, but there are certain industries that India is not very good at electronics, at chips. India is very good at designing chips. So over time, India will get there. But in some sectors, such as chemicals, pharmaceuticals, India has already made a lot of headway. And it's not just China plus one, but it's sometimes Europe plus one. So all of that was working for India. Over time, it will happen, but there are many things that China makes that India is not yet ready to make, and that is the challenge. The sooner we do that, and the PLI schemes will help with that, and we are looking forward to the government helping with more PLI schemes, and someday India getting there, but it's going to take time. But the benefits are being felt for India right now.
The benefits are being felt, Amitabh, from a banking perspective. 2016 onwards, we saw the big cleanup, and that continued. I don't know if the original proponents of the cleanup, some of whom are either no longer in government or alive, what they had in terms of a roadmap. But I ask you today, 2023, how successful has the cleanup been, and what has it meant in terms of the positives, and if you could focus on the last mile, the Aam Aadmi, in terms of the benefits?
So obviously, I think if you look at the last 6 to 7 years, the cleanup has been quite thorough. And thorough in terms of ensuring that NPLs are recognized, thorough in terms of ensuring that the mechanisms put in place that those NPLs can be looked at and those assets can be sold. Entrepreneurs being given a signal that the businesses can be taken away from them. Some people who have done frauds have been put behind bars, and that process is still on. So I think a lot of things have been put in place and mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that a crisis of this does not fester for that long. So that is all good news. It has meant from an Aam Aadmi that ultimately government has had to fund some of these write-offs because the government banks were also a big part of it, and so Aam Aadmi in some sense has paid for it. So no government would like a crisis of this kind to get repeated again. My only view as a banker today is that we are in a perfect moment here. Balance sheets are clean. We have learned from our mistakes. But today, whatever lending we do, or the next 2 to 3 years, what lending we have to do in a manner and a shape so that does not result in another crisis. Maybe not as large, but a smaller crisis 5 to 7 years down the line.
That's a corporate view. I'm interrupting you here. If all of this has happened, why is the man on the street saying, "मेरे लिए पैसा महंगा हो गया है"?
Well,
explain that.
So, if you look at, and Mr. Godrej has been around for a very long time, I mean, if you look at the interest rates in India, what they used to be, there will be double-digit interest rates. Yes, the government very successfully brought it down to where they are. Now, there's only 200 basis point hike which has happened when we talk about hikes, which is still around pre-COVID levels.
But in terms of overall cost of capital,
yes, because the inflation
on a regional or maybe a global perspective, we are still amongst the highest cost economy.
So it has fed in two ways. One is that people are feeling that interest rates are higher. Secondly, he or she is seeing a higher price on the street for the goods they buy.
No, the point I'm trying to get, Amitabh, is that IBC cleanup and the banks taking deep haircuts, in some cases going bald, how has that helped the common man? Because I don't think they completely understand. I'm just...
Oh, that way. I think they now know that the banks are in a much better shape and the right person can get the right amount of credit. And
कोई बैंक डूबेगा नहीं.
डूबेगा नहीं. And second, if this crisis does not happen and credit costs remain low, it will reflect in a lower interest rate cost.
Was there a danger of a bank crisis in the last 5-6 years?
I mean, yes, some banks have gone through a crisis and came pretty close to going bankrupt. I think RBI has saved them quite well and they're doing pretty well now. Most of them have raised money, they've got new investors in. RBI's monitoring mechanism, I think they've raised the bar a couple of times now, and I believe the kind of data they're collecting, analysis they're doing, and how close they are to the banks now, what I see, I think it's a sea change.
Mr. Godrej, should the government be in public sector, own public sector banks, or should it divest and reduce it to maybe just a few? They took a very bold decision on Air India. BSNL, they haven't. But what about public sector banks?
I think in the long run they should divest the public sector banks. I don't see any public interest being served by that, and they're
not even through loan mailers.
Does it really serve the public? I'm sure.
No, but I asked you this because you said put cash in the hands of people.
Yes.
What about the Mudra Yojana, for example?
But I'm sure the private sector is offering them at similar interest rates. Maybe the government banks are doing some amount of subsidized lending. I'm not an expert on that field. Maybe.
I'll ask you a point about which you certainly are an expert.
Yeah.
We keep hearing about the change in consumption and spending.
Yes.
Bharat badal raha hai. India is changing. Things have changed. There is also the other side of the argument: the rich are getting richer, the poor have got poorer. We are not in a political economy decision. As a marketer, as a producer, what has changed as far as India's economy is concerned, especially at the bottom?
Yes, not enough has changed at the bottom. The pandemic has affected the bottom more than... There was a lot of improvement in the bottom before the pandemic. The pandemic has affected the bottom more than the middle. The middle class has grown a lot in India. Ultimately, we want all the poor to become middle class, and the only way to do that is adequate education. We need to get our schools straightened out, we need to get vocational education straightened out, and we need to get women highly educated. In states like Tamil Nadu, where women are highly educated, the development of children is excellent. If women all over India are well educated, the children will be well educated and everyone in India will be prosperous.
Amitabh, as a lender, what has changed?
Well, I mean, from a private bank perspective, you talked about the crisis. That has led us to obviously change in terms of what risk guardrails we follow. Technology is changing the way banking is done across the world and in India. There, the government and RBI has played even a bigger role by creating platforms like, Aadhaar and GST and account aggregator and the whole payment systems they have created, and they continue to create more. ONDC, all the stuff that we talked about. So the face of banking is changing, and how you interact with the customers, what experience you give to the customers.
The pace has also changed.
Oh, incredibly. Technology brings a pace, a change in pace.
But is technology leaving behind people? Is fintech technology, banking technology leaving certain people behind in India? Are there any worry spots that you would like to address?
I don't think so. You know, if your product is right, and when I say product, I'm including technology in it, even the uneducated person is able to adopt it very, very quickly. You look at people who are uneducated and how they use their mobile
Because the
phone.
interface is intuitive.
Interfaces are intuitive. So I think technology is bringing them in more and more to the fold. So my view is, as a banker, if we don't cater to and don't understand and appreciate what this technology is doing, the analytics, the availability of data, the size of data, you will get left behind. So
Quick point. It used to be said that the chota borrower has lower levels of delinquency than the big borrower. How do you explain that, if you agree with it at all?
No, it is the big borrowers and big defaults are the ones who have an impact on your balance sheet in a much more significant manner than the small ones. You need to make a consistent mistake for a long period of time with small borrowers for it to become very big. In case of a large borrower, you need to make one mistake and it can take care of you. So that's why it plays out the way it plays out. But that does not mean that...
Ek lohar ki saw sunar ki maybe. But as we wind down this conversation, I want you to pick your favorite theme that you are looking out for from a business macro perspective about what will change in 2023, either a technology trend or a consumption trend that you would really want to tell our viewers about. Hey, watch out, that's an opportunity.
I would say that technologies that make the world sustainable are developing, and we need to pursue these technologies very fast, otherwise the planet has no future.
We have a lot of snow behind us. This perhaps isn't climate change, although some veterans say it should have been colder with much more snow.
Instead of saying global warming, we're now saying climate change, because some winters are getting more severe. Certainly summers are getting much hotter. But as jet streams change, you've seen terrible winter weather in the United States.
You've seen more snow here in Davos?
Climate change, not global warming.
Okay, climate change, and that impacts India. The same question to you, Amitabh. That one thing that you are really keenly looking forward to.
I agree that technology is obviously going to bring a huge amount of change. I think environment and how governments react and what citizens and countries around the world do about it is the second change. Third is, I think we have become less, very, very intolerant of each other. So what conflicts you're seeing around the world and the reasons why those conflicts are becoming major ones, I think is something the world needs to think a lot about and do and create mechanisms so that they don't result in whole world going into a bit of a chaos.
Yeah.
I think what
I entirely endorse that.
I think what Amitabh has told us at the end of this conversation is related to the theme of the World Economic Forum at Davos this year, cooperation in a fragmented world, 3 decades of a globalized trade order and some unwinding, and with fears of much more happening. Amitabh Chaudhry, someone who has turned around a bank and is credited with putting it on very, very firm footing, and Mr. Nadir Godrej, one of India's most storied industrialists. Thank you very much for your time with us today. With that, it's a wrap on this conversation. We'll continue with more. Do stay tuned in. If you have, thank you very much for watching.